hump day. What's going on with you, Coop? How you doing, sir?
Doing well, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, man. We're gonna jump right into it because I know we don't have a lot of time to talk about these things. We're gonna welcome everybody into the room, but Nasir's Nasir's album, Nas's album, Nasir, is celebrating its third
hmm
anniversary today. And this morning I was just going through the album, listening and whatnot, and I'm like, what is everybody's problem with this record? And so figure we talk about it. Anybody in the room want to know, what are your thoughts on the Nasir album? Did you like it? Did you not like it? And if you didn't like it, why? I mean, because it seemed widely consistent to me. What say you, Coop?
I mean, I remember writing the review for it. It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't the album of the year that I stated that it was at the time, but it still remained the album of the year contender in my eyes. Most notably because it didn't really have any foreseeable flaws that I could see with the project. And I tried to look at it as objectively as possible. It was like, and you and I literally just said this offline, like literally maybe 2 or 3 minutes before we went on. It's like, well, production wise, there's nothing wrong with the project.
Right.
Content wise, nothing wrong with the project. I mean, it's Nas. I know we're not talking about MCing, are we? so
Right.
so it's like for me, I think what really happened is that the album didn't have any home runs per se,
Mm-hmm.
and because it didn't have any home runs, I think people really didn't look at the overall consistency of the project. I don't think any song on here is necessarily a 5 out of 5, but I don't hear any 3 out of 5s either. I hear mostly like somewhere between a 4 and a 4.5, almost on every record. Like what is Simple Things the weakest record on here?
Possibly. I mean, but it's an outro and a seven-track album. I was thinking that maybe White Label was possibly a home run or possibly the best song on
You,
there. Everything
you know,
was adored too for a lot of people.
My my White Label to me is kind of like people like White Label because it's kind of Nasty Nas ish. It's
Mm-hmm.
not Nasty Nas, but it has some of those elements of Nasty Nas. Like you can hear the guy on Made You Look and the guy on kind of New York State of Mind a little bit on White Label, and I think that's why people like White Label.
Mm-hmm.
But if when I hear White Label, I almost feel like Nas didn't even write that. Mike, I always told you I thought White Label was a freestyle
Mm-hmm.
because Nas when he freestyles sometimes he'll get off kilter and funky like that with it. And so like I was like, I don't even know if he even wrote that. And so like that's like a testament to his talent, how much people actually write that like that record. Cause I don't think he wrote it.
I
I think
think
he was just spitting and it just stuck. Like he's one of those guys, he can just go in the booth sometimes and spit and it's gonna stick.
going back listening to the album, I mean, I think it aged pretty well, fairly well. It still sounds good, has replay value. Everything was a dope record too. I think that was one of the standouts of the album when it came out. I know that the album got delayed a day, in today's time, that's damn near a week. Maybe that was what it was. It was the expectations being so high because you remember it was supposed to drop on a Friday, and then it ended up dropping that Saturday, and then Jay Z and Beyonce ended up dropping something on Saturday too, which was all uncharacteristic because everybody was dropping music on Friday, and they did that whole they had that kind of album release thing where they were in Queensbridge. You had Kanye out there, the Kardashians, like it was a whole who's who thing. So maybe the hype made that project somewhat underwhelming for certain people off first listen, but it's hard to say that it wasn't a good project. Elmer Jameson says Adam and Eve is classic. Well, see, and that's the thing too, because that was one of the ones we would think it was maybe a weaker record on the album. So if
So
anything, we're talking about 5 or 6 records that were really good records on there. Hold on 1 second. Go ahead, Coop.
I mean, I mean, I personally don't think that any of these records are classic per se. But Adam and Eve,
I'm gonna
Everything,
elaborate.
Bonjour, Cop Shot the Kid, White Label, Not for Radio, they all have classic elements to them. They do. Like they're all really, really strong records. I guess if anything, I guess you could say for the stature of the two people coming together, you would have liked for this project to be helmed the classic, and so it's not that. But I
Right.
think Nas spoke to that on the Breakfast Club interview when he said he just really didn't have enough time with Ye. I think they probably, I mean, think about this: if they made this in 7 days, like what would they have done if they even had 30 days together?
Right. And then also, wow, 7 days. That's the other thing you got to factor in about this
That's what I'm
project.
saying. You got to
And
factor in that when you go in to look at it. Like, I mean, we usually don't judge the process of it, but I mean, like, I know this because I reviewed all those albums that summer because we were like, yo, we got to document this. Kanye was literally trying to like executive produce an album every week for a month, and so I did all those reviews for that. And so, I mean, people don't understand that was like that's very strenuous to put out that amount of material, even if there's only 7 songs involved
yeah,
over a course of time. Like that's a lot of pressure on the artist, pressure on the producer. And so when you look at it, it's like at the end, reflecting on it, it's actually a testament to both who they are as an MC and as a producer that the album is actually this quality and still has joints on it that you can still play today. Like, Mike, when you called me, I was just playing Not for Radio again. And I'm like, no, this is dope. He's
yeah.
spitting on here.
Yeah, and and he was really going there too, in the way that we like Nas to go there. Talking
Yeah.
of what he was talking about. I'm glad you brought all that up because we do, and again, we don't normally judge the process, but on this project, we do have to put some things in context because again, Kanye had just made Daytona. Um, he had just went out there and put together Kid See Ghost with Kid Cudi. He put together the Ye album, and then he was going to do the Nas album, putting that out, and then he had the Tiana Taylor on deck too. And he put out all these records within a month and a half time. And the other thing to put in context is the fact that him and Nas don't have a whole lot of work together. So it wasn't like one of those things where he's very comfortable working with Nas. This was nearly a first time of them making multiple records together in one sitting. And Nas normally doesn't do that anyway. So when you put in all those factors, this was an excellent output. And they made it in 7 days on top of that. I don't understand the problem that people have with this project. I mean, Nas went out there and put together a whole movie for every track on there, and people loved it. Now somehow this wasn't a good album. I don't understand.
Talk to me.
It's people are gonna have to prove that. I do think that sometimes certain albums get a bad rap. I think Electric Circus is one of those. I know you're not a big fan of Electric Circus, but it puts people in position to make a quote unquote comeback album. And I think if this was an album that would put Nas in that position, he was in a good position because he didn't really come off of an actual bad album. You know what I'm saying?
So I think over time, what we really probably need to do, and this is why we cover stuff like this, we need to kind of reframe the conversation. I think if you actually go back and listen to Nasir, and then you go and listen to King's Disease, it's like, well, those are really two quality and consistent projects from beginning to end, back to back, on the back nine of his rap career.
Yeah.
That's that GOAT stuff that I'm talking about, Mike. When I go back and listen to the records, I'm like, no, like if you go and listen to these last 23, 24 songs that he's put out on these last two albums, Mike, about 15 to 17 of the songs are at a very high quality.
Yeah.
He's not the MC that he was on Take It in Blood or I Gave You Power or Life's a Bitch or New York State of Mind. But once again, Mike, nobody's really been that MC outside of Rakim and Biggie briefly, and he's turned himself into a really, really quality song maker, and that's what Nasir is. It's an album of quality songs.
I mean, and if you throw Life is Good in there too, I mean, you have a really good string of projects at this part of his career. Yeah. To be honest,
hold on. Didn't he throw something up in between there that was kind of like, hold on, wasn't there something between Life is Good and Nasir?
If I think it was Distant Relatives, which is good as well.
Mike, I mean that's
yeah.
I mean Mike, that's that 4 album run is better than his first 4 album run because his
It
fourth album
really
was
is.
Nostradamus.
It really
That's what I'm
is.
saying, Mike.
It really
That's
is.
better than his first 4 album run, Mike. His first 4 album run is really what he's known for as an MC, specifically the first 2 to 3. But I mean, Mike, Nostradamus is his fourth album. So wouldn't you say that Life is Good and Distant Relatives and Nasir and King's Disease are more consistent efforts?
I definitely would, and I would definitely put it above his middle efforts too. When you got what Stillmatic,
No,
Godson. No, no, you get Stillmatic, Godson, and then
on the
you.
high level. Hold on, so Stillmatic and Godson are better than I Am and Nostradamus by far.
No, no, I feel you, but they're
Not
not
by
better
far, but it's
than
not better than I Am.
Illmatic, and you know what I'm saying. So, but no, Stillmatic, Godson, and then you go into what was the double album? Streets Disciple, and then you go into Untitled. I think it's better than that string of four too. If you're talking about consistency.
If we're talking about consistency, because here we go again, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
It's like he's really made himself into a quality song maker at times. So,
Yeah.
Mike, let's unpack his albums. How many he got now? Like 12 or something like that. So let's
something
unpack
like
them.
that.
Yeah. So if we were to unpack them by 4, this would probably be the best run of the 4 if we're talking about his consistency. It's probably got the least amount of his classic stuff, but it's got the quality, the consistency, which is what people have always, I guess, when comparing him directly to Jay, they've always said what? Jay's more consistent.
Right.
Well, you really can't say that the last 10 years. If you're looking at these 4 projects, he's made himself into a consistent MC. That's why I'm saying, Mike, he's the GOAT. He checks all the boxes because if his consistency was a question, if you go listen to his last 4 projects, that should take that out of the equation. Because think about this. How many people can say that their first 2 albums sound the way Illmatic and It Was Written sound and can say at this stage in the game that their last 4 albums are more consistent than the first 4? Like, that's a hard thing to pull off for the level that he was hitting his mark at early.
No, you're right. You're right.
He's had to adapt and change a lot, Mike.
We got somebody in the chat that said Lloyd Banks got the best album out, hands down. You know what? Let's go right into that. Let's go right into that.
I'm about to say, are we going right into it?
Might as well just go right into it since, you know, it's brought up. We're going to talk about the best hip-hop albums of 2021 so far anyway. And, you know, since we already got people in the room, why go off and then jump back on? So, yeah, in your opinion, man, what are the 5 best hip-hop albums that have come out in 2021 right now? I mean, not right now. 2021 so far. And right now, what would you say is hip-hop's album of the year of 2021?
You want to know what I realized? It's really a murky conversation at this stage of the year, which is, I guess, is probably what we would consider to be a little past the midway point, Mike, because when we're talking album of the year, we probably cut it off probably about like first or second week of December. So that would put us at the halfway point right now, wouldn't it?
It would.
So here are the projects that come to mind. Conway's La Maquina comes to mind. Skyzoo's all the Brilliant Things that he just dropped.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to get into Skyzoo's project along with Lloyd Banks' project.
Yes.
Which is up there. The Rosenberg project, Mike, would be the other one that comes to mind right now. And where else would you say? Where would we go for number 5? Because those would be the 4 I think of. With Cole or Plugs 2 is what comes to mind.
I would put Cole in that. I think Cole's project was better than Plugs 2.
So did I. So,
yeah.
So that would be how the album of the contenders have rounded themselves out so far. So I kind of want to highlight some things.
Hold on, one second. Donovan says that Ransom's album is fire. Now,
hold on, what?
He said Ransom album is crazy.
I'm going to be honest and tell you right now, Mike, I just texted you this last week. Ransom Crazy Nice. I didn't know Ransom album was out.
Okay.
And that's what I'm about to do when we get done here, fam.
Yeah, we got to check that out, fam. Appreciate the heads up. I can't believe we missed that.
I've been moving the last 2 weeks, fam. I don't even know how I missed that. Like, I feel bad.
Yeah, we're going to talk about it. It might be what our show is going to be about Friday if it's fire.
I was actually going to talk about his verse on Falsified on Lloyd Banks' album. That was one of the highlights of Lloyd Banks' album was Falsified to me, and Ransom was part of the reason why.
Okay. Well, go ahead and saying what you were saying. I just wanted to bring that in because I know that's one of the albums that people are talking about that we haven't mentioned and we haven't, given the rightful listen to.
going to listen to Ransom as soon as this is over.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as this is over. So let's. So where do you want to start? Which album do you kind of like want to go over the
Well,
strong
this is
suits
what I
of?
want to do. I personally think that the Skyzoo album is better than the Lloyd Banks album, in my
So do I.
opinion. You do too? Okay.
So
I was
do I.
really
So
impressed with the Skyzoo album.
I kind of want to start out there and
Okay.
unpack why, because here's how I feel. If Skyzoo had the features that Lloyd Banks had, this would be easy album of the year without even like much of a discussion.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, that's a good point.
Think
I
about
didn't
that.
think about that.
Think
Yeah.
about that. Even if he had half the appearances, like if you were to give him that Gibbs verse,
Mm.
that Marciano verse, and
Yeah.
that Styles verse, the Skyzoo album is album of the year. Like with some space between the next runner.
Right.
And so the Skyzoo album is wildly consistent. The production's at a high level, Mike. It was like the production was kind of. I go back to the intro, the moment of truth, where Guru
Mm-hmm.
was talking about we have certain formulas and we update our formulas with the time. It's like I hear Skyzoo updating his formula, but also updating the formula that he grew up on, and you hear it on the first record
Yeah.
because he does a Nas reference from It Was Written and a Biggie reference, you know what I mean, all on the
Mm-hmm.
same record to kind of let you know where he's at, and the album just kind of flows from there. So he knows who he is. He knows his audience. The execution and delivery is great as an MC, and in terms of the song sequence and structure, the production is there.
Yeah.
My cousin Monkeesh hit me up and he was like, y'all gotta talk about the Skyzoo album. Like that's why I hit you up, because like
Yeah.
that's one of my cousins that's one of the older cousins that's like a hip hop fan that don't push me. So when I know he's reaching out to me, I was like, okay, let me go listen to Skyzoo again.
Yeah.
Like I did.
I think I was
like,
telling you about it too. Like, yo, man, it's really the truth.
no, you told
It's
me people
riding
was
to it.
talking about the Skyzoo, so I went and listened to it. But like I said, Mike, I've been moving, so I've been listening to stuff, but I ain't been really digging in the way
Mm-hmm.
that I had to. Like, oh no, I just dug in on the Skyzoo. I was like, oh, this is beautiful, because you want to know what it is, Mike. If you love, Mike, I mean, you're a Tribe Called Quest lover, De La
Yeah.
Soul, like
You know what it put me in the mind of, honestly, and I think it's because he did a record with this producer. It was almost like on some Pete Rock shit. Like, and I remember the project that he did with Pete Rock, and I was like, yo, man, this production is here. And honestly, this album sounds right there with that one. And
Mike,
that's high praise for me. Pete Rock's one of my
no,
favorites.
Mike, I'm about to give it even some more high praise, Mike. When I was listening to the production, I felt like it was Pete Rock and Dilla.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's how the production was. And Skyzoo is nice and the project's well put together. So, Mike, if I was actually talking album of the year right now, I would actually put Skyzoo in a slight lead ahead of Lloyd Banks, Conway, and Rosenberg. And I want to unpack why. First of all, with the Rosenberg,
I agree with you.
I'm never going to give a project like that album of the year, even though if we're just going song for song, it's the best album. What's the best album song for song? Because he was able to get shit from everybody, Mike.
Yeah.
He got that crazy voice from Stove on there, that Hallways with Rock Marciano, that Midnight song that you love. West Side Gun tossed him staying. It's like he got hot jokes from everybody, so that's a little unfair. The project is brilliant in terms of how it sounds, because you still have to put it together,
Right.
make it something audible. And like you said last week, somebody like a Khaled hasn't proven that he can put a project together that's going to sound this good from beginning to end. So kudos to Rosenberg. Also unfair advantage, so not album of the year.
Well, I will give him this too, and I agree. It is an unfair advantage when you're talking about, somebody like you said, like a Skyzoo, who's just putting together his project. And if he did have a quarter of those features, this would be all everybody's talking about. So yeah, I agree with you on there.
Mike, if he had half the features that Lloyd Banks had on his album, this would be everywhere his album of the year right now. Everywhere.
I agree with you 100%. And I was going to say that. I was going to say that Skyzoo sleepily has, or quietly, I should say, has the album of the year so far. He's in the lead, in my opinion. I mean, like, I put that record on before I put on any of these other records.
So let's go to the Lloyd Banks album and why I think Skyzoo's album is better than the Lloyd Banks album.
Mm-hmm.
So for both of them as MCs, neither one of them is considered to be big stars, but well known.
Right.
So the command that you're feeling on Lloyd Banks' album, it feels more industry because Lloyd Banks has more industry ties, and so it makes it seem like a more enjoyable listen. But it's a more enjoyable industry listen. It's not necessarily a better listen. When you really break it down and you start going song for song without the feature, Skyzoo song by himself are better.
Right.
And that's just it at the end of the day.
Right.
And although Lloyd Banks holds his own with all of his counterparts on the album, which is commendable for the amount of time that he spent out of the booth, Mike, and out of the game like consistently.
Mm-hmm.
It still doesn't change the fact that he has a lot of guest appearances, and those guest appearances showed up and did a stellar job for him, and that helps give the album that feel. Skyzoo doesn't have all that, but the album's right there, and in my case, a little bit ahead. That actually puts it 2 steps ahead to me because it it's like this. When we talk about the documentary as a classic, and we compare it to other classics, we always end up putting the other classic ahead of the documentary because we'd be like, man, but he didn't have as much help as the game had.
I think that's people's problem with underrating the game's catalog in general. I think that's a issue that the game has had. Period.
Catalog being underrated in general, but when you compare it to classics from its era, like a B or Late Registration, and or what, Get Rich or Die Trying. Even with Get Rich or Die Trying, same camp, but less help, Mike.
Yeah, 50, even though a lot of his help came on the marketing end, when you look at it in production end, he really didn't have a lot of help on that record. And a lot of those tracks weren't actually produced by Dr. Dre or anything like that either.
Dre did 5 tracks. If you want to know what 50 did, 50 actually put people in position on that album. Like where the guest appearances and all that fall. When you're listening to the documentary, you can tell that it's like Dr. Dre and Interscope like are organizing and structuring that project. And it's like, no, put that Just Blaze track right before that Timbaland track. We got to have Just Blaze and Timbaland right. You know what I mean? It feels industry like that, even though it's a classic. And so that's the thing that I would probably say about the Lloyd Banks, which is funny because Lloyd Banks is on both of those albums, I believe, that we're talking about.
Right. You know, man, it's interesting. And I like to see somebody like Skyzoo get, this, just be in the lead for album of the year because I think his album's better than J. Cole's album. I mean, I know J. Cole's album had a whole lot of hype. And, people liked it the week of, but I don't think that album ended up having a lot of legs.
I would put it on the thumb right now for album of the year out of 5. You know what I'm saying? I would put it on the thumb. It would be 5th. I want to go to Conway's project right quick. First,
go to Conway's project because I wanted to talk about that too, yeah.
Here's the thing, too. It's even hard to rate this project because it's like, I know he's coming out with another album. And it's like I've been following Conway now for a couple of years, and it's like, I watch how dudes work, Mike. And it's like, oh, I know he's like leveling up his work right now. You know what I'm saying? Like La Maquina, like that's like a double for him. So the fact that I think La Maquina is even like an album of the year contender, that's a testament to the run that he's on. That's not his full work and effort towards the project yet. Like he's putting that work in, Mike, but he ain't like swinging like for the fences yet. He's currently like swinging for the fences right now with this next project. I think of all the album of the year contenders, La Maquina has the most highlights because Conway's the most prolific MC. So there's nothing on Lloyd Banks or Skyzoo's project that's fucking with like KD or 200 Pies, but the projects from beginning to end are a little more solid, even though Conway's still the better MC, obviously.
Well, someone in the chat said DMX's album was a flop. Only 2 or 3 good standouts. I believe Swiss wasn't supposed to produce all those tracks. It's interesting you say that, and I don't know if you listened to our show when we talked about the album. Yes, Swiss doesn't really have any I produced the whole album classics under his belt in the first place, and even X's classic